Hi everyone to the OLM community meeting. And the first thing we do is going through the 1.0 work items. So let me share my screen and then you can go through it. Hopefully you all can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So the done column looks fine to me. Everything in purple. Ready to review. We still have Todd's PR. I think. Let me see if it is. Uh, I don't think it's linked here.
That's not it. There is another one.
All right. There is another one.
Which I may not reference because I think we. Hold on. Let me see here. Let me tell you the number because I have too many PRs open. Actually, I don't have too many PRs open.
I got it.
1379 is the current PR.
Right.
Here we go.
Yeah. So okay. So yeah, I think this needs review. I wanted to review Todd for some reason. I think lost track of it. But I think I'll hopefully. I think Joe and some other folks also review it.
Joe and Bryce looked at it. I will just simply say that there are some differing opinions based on some of the comments. So those need to be, I think, reconciled or understood that those were decisions made. So
Okay. Cool. Moving to the implementing column, we have external API review submission. So this is in progress. Probably we have not linked the PR for the review. Do you guys think we should link it? We have actually sent a PR to kind of review to OpenShift API folks.
So we just spun a PR, a work in progress, this morning for catalog D, and I'll spin one for accumulating the operator controller work in progress stuff as we go through this in a little bit, so we can link those to this.
I think it makes sense also that we can link to the PR that we opened in the OpenShift API repo just for the review, just to put some transparency on it.
Yeah, I just linked it. So hopefully we will go from there. So this is in progress. And I think like Jordan said, the changes would also come in separate PRs. Rest of the three issues we have basically waiting for the review to be done. So that's pretty much on our 1.0 board. Is there anything you all think should be represented in this board? Is not currently, let us know. Okay. The next maybe we should go through. I know I have led a topic about let's revisit the epics listed for 1.0 and 1.x. We can go back after seeing the roadmap check-in. Let's do the roadmap check-in first, and then we can go there. We still have, yeah, it's similar to what we saw on the board. A review and finalize V1 API for catalog D, review and finalize V1 APIs for operator controller, and then 1.0 proposed release blocker. So let's see if there is any new um, proposed release blockers, but there is none. So we are good. And this is already being worked upon. So that's the dots PR. Yeah. So we are good here.
Well, you're very quiet, by the way.
My voice is very less. Oh, see, my microphone. Fedora decided to reduce the volume of it some reason.
There you go.
Yeah, sorry about it. Okay.
And Lala, have you shifted screens, or are you still showing the API review one on over here?
I have been shifting screens.
Okay.
Your screen sharing is paused. Why? It's showing me, actually, as Joe is telling me that your screen sharing is paused for some reason. Let me stop it and share it again.
All right.
So-
Looks good now.
Yeah, something happened in between. But yeah, I was on this board. Then I moved to 1.0 proposed blockers here, and I did not see anything here. And then I went back. Okay, it's good, right? Cool. So that's mostly done. And then the topic we have is let's revisit epics listed for 1.0 and 1.x. So let me open it. So I was going through it last week and I noticed that in 1.0, obviously we have epics, we're tracking them, but then which is fine. But then from 1.x as well, we kind of finished some epics. For example, support installing bundles from private registry. There was cluster extension support selecting from specific catalogs, better controls for disambiguating packages and appear in multiple catalogs. So these are the epics that got finished from 1.x. So I think we should move them to 1.0, right? Because they're already in 1.0 code, like before we release 1.0 code.
Yes. The only one I think is potentially interesting is that row 16. Right? Like the only way that we support installing from a private registry is by referencing a secret when you run catalog D and operator controller, which is not an API that anybody on the cluster who's interacting with the APIs actually has access to. So I think it's fine for us to say we've done this part of it, but I think we should probably also have another epic for, okay, now we're gonna let users use private image registries via pull secrets mentioned in the API objects.
I guess we do not have a epic created for that.
Correct, because originally I think that epic sort of was that. And then we changed it to sort of do the first phase of it.
That part of it sounds like a 1.x thing for sure, right?
Yeah, that the second part. So this epic, I think we can say like, yep, we did the first phase. This is done. It's closed. It goes into the 1.0. We should have a new epic for support installing bundles from a private registry via API fields or something like that. And Lala, I know this is in the operator controller project, but because it was an epic, I think this spanned catalog D and operator controller. The follow-up epic needs to talk about cluster catalogs as well.
Just trying to figure out how to present this. Do you want to add a comment about this, Joe?
I would just say need to follow up for supporting private bundle and catalog images. I think that's probably sufficient. And then just via API field. Yeah. There you go.
Okay, and I think for the tags here, I can change it to remove 1.x and then probably put 1.0 here.
And then move it to, I think there's like a project. You got to do one other thing. Move it to
Or drag it and put it here. It is
needs to
possible.
be in. I don't think you can. I think you have to change the iteration in the project dropdown in that issue as well. You have to open that issue back up.
Okay, let me open it.
So see where it says projects? Yeah, right in there. Set that
All right, I got it. Thank you. Makes sense. Okay, so if I refresh it now, it should be in the 1.0. Yeah. The next is this epic cluster extension support selecting from specific catalogs. Okay, I think this is good. Yes. Another one is better control for disambiguating packages that appear in multiple catalogs.
Yep, so that one's done.
Sorry. So this is also fixed. Okay. So this is the final list. Looks like pending, which are in progress. Review and final is V1 APIs for catalog D. Review and final is V1 APIs for operator controller. Then 1.0 proposed release blockers. Other than that, everything in 1.0 is basically done. Do you think we should, I mean, unless we have more topics, let me check. We don't have any other topics, or do you think we can go through the 1.x epics a little bit now?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Cool. So the first one is help admins determine necessary permissions for bundle lifecycling.
Yeah,
Joe,
this one I think is
yeah.
pretty important. This is essentially the fact that we require a service account, but we don't help you build the permissions for that service account to do the management of the cluster extension. So this epic is about helping admins determine how to set up the permissions. We wrote all those docs about it, but it would be better if we had some UX tooling around how this works. So this epic is about doing that.
Yeah, this sounds pretty important then, right? Can we, I want to see what others think, but I just wanted to add that we can, if we think something is important, we should need to look in probably next release, we can actually move them to a target called 1.1.
Yeah, let's go ahead and move things in there. We can always make 1.1 smaller if we want to split things up, but that at least is a good separator for now.
Right.
Brett
So
that too.
yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so Joe, is this somewhat guided by the pre-flight check work that we did?
As far as I know, we do not have pre-flight checks for permissions. Is that true?
We do not have any, but I have a PR up with like a POC of adding them.
Yeah. I think there's another epic just for that. So I think that work needs to be done, and then this would be easier to build if we had the pre-flight check.
Yeah, so maybe I think the story should just mention that. That's all. I don't think it doesn't look like it does.
No, do you have the link to that other story?
Not off the top, but it's probably in that list of the v1.x stuff as another epic.
Sure. I think we'll find out while going through it, right? So
Can
cool.
you just scroll down real quick and let's see if we can find it.
Yeah, right there. 28.
No, that's not the right one.
Oh.
That's cluster constraints. There's a bunch of different pre-flight checks.
Oh, okay.
Is this the one? No.
No, that one's not it either. Do we have one for permissions? Maybe we don't.
Yeah, right there. 37. Permission validation
There
pre-flight
you
check.
go.
Yeah. Okay. That's good.
So that one needs to also be in the 1.1. So I'll quickly explain this one. In order for us to have nice tooling around helping cluster admins build the right service account with the right RBAC, we need to know what the contents of a bundle are and what the result of any potential templating, which we don't do right now. Well, we kind of do a little bit right now, but it's pretty much hard-coded, the things that might happen. But essentially, we don't really know what permissions you need until you tell us a cluster extension. And so the idea here is we can add a pre-flight check that does all the permission checks and populates something in the status that says, can't proceed with an upgrade because these permissions are missing. And once we have that, then we can go back to that other epic we looked at and say, oh, now we can build some tooling that knows how to read the status and help you build those permissions based on what the status says. So this is a prerequisite according to our drafts. I think we have some designs, but I don't know how far along they are. But I know we've had some conversations where we've sort of called out that we think this is prerequisite work for the tooling.
Right. I think we should mention this. So this one, 919, right?
919 depends on 988.
Yeah. So yeah, that's good. I don't know if there's any labels like that. Depends on. I don't think it provides one, but maybe you guys know about it. You can do it. No, we can fix it offline.
Yeah.
For now, I think just moving on. Okay. So the next one is support orphan deletion policy.
So no description here. That should probably get updated, but essentially this one is when you delete a cluster extension, it would be nice if there was a way to say, don't also delete all of the managed objects that are managed by this cluster extension, which essentially amounts to removing all of the owner references. Well, if there's a field that controls this deletion policy that says orphan, then we just wouldn't. Well, we have to think about how to do this. Essentially, when we delete the cluster extension, we don't delete the CRDs and the deployments and whatever else is in the bundle.
Yeah, we just wouldn't set owner references on the resources whenever we.
Maybe, but then that might affect. Well, no, label selectors and informers are different. So yeah, that might be the solution. We have to be careful. Might have to be careful because there might be places where we have like predicates or watch maps or something based on those owner references. Like I don't think we do, but just in case.
So I think so let me reiterate what I understood. So when we delete a cluster extension, obviously the objects are left, the custom resources are left in the cluster. We have to make sure that the owner references are removed and
That's an implementation detail.
detail.
The goal here is, so by default, when you delete a cluster extension, that means uninstall everything from the bundle that's installed.
Right.
There are use cases where someone might want to say, you know what, I don't like that OLM is managing this. I want to delete the cluster extension. Maybe I want to completely uninstall OLM v1, but I want to leave my managed objects in place. So when I delete my cluster extension, I need a way to tell OLM not to actually go and delete all of the other managed objects.
Yeah. So so we need to add description what you talked about, Joe. How do I don't see we have any labels which basically tell that this epic needs refinement or grooming. So should we create a label or something which will tell us that we need to come back and basically make sure we add more data to this epic?
Is there a triage needs information? Maybe use that.
Yeah, I think this is good. Yeah. Yeah. And then
I think this one is urgent.
Right.
So I wouldn't move this out of 1.x.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds good. But yeah, I'm keeping it where it is currently. So moving to the next one.
This one is directly related to trying to support Helm charts natively, which also is not urgent. This is even debatable whether we should do this. So I would say we can probably skip over this for now. Leave it in the 1.x list.
So do you
Don't we
think
at
it
least
should be?
need, if we don't implement this, don't we at least need some sort of error handling and status to say, hey, we didn't install your thing because you have hooks in it?
If we don't implement this, then we likely have to support running the Helm hooks. So that's where it's like, well, maybe we actually want to run the Helm hooks, in which case we shouldn't reject. So that's why I'm like, we need to do a lot of design to really know exactly how we want to handle all of that. There's a separate epic about supporting Helm charts natively that I've been dumping a bunch of caveats into about how things work and why things might be hard.
I think this is the epic we talked about, right? We're talking about, Joe.
Yeah.
So my question is, without Helm hooks, can we say that we support Helm charts?
Yeah, I mean, right now we say we support registry v1 bundles, but then we reject some of them that we don't handle. So this would be sort of the same. We could say, well, we don't handle Helm hooks yet. So for now, we'll just reject charts that we see Helm hooks being used. And then we can decide whether we want to start supporting them later. And maybe that means we have to implement more complex logic to handle it. So the reason I made this epic is to essentially give us a simpler set of assumptions for implementing native Helm support initially.
So 962, which is the other epic, which is add support for handling Helm charts. I think that's should actually go in first, and then we can come back to this later.
Well, when we do the other one, we have to do this as part of it if we're not going to support running Helm hooks.
Okay.
So really, like this is part of that other epic, really. But I just wanted to call this out to make sure it was clear. but again, like we haven't designed this, so I think really a lot of this discussion is premature. The reason these epics exist is just so we can sort of see in general what we think our roadmap looks like.
Joe, I had a question here. So you said that native support for Helm charts. So does that mean I can deploy a Helm chart as a cluster extension directly?
So there is another epic about handing a cluster extension a bundle image directly.
Okay.
So I think I would separate them, right? So the way that things work now is you have to have a catalog that has OLM.bundle schemas in it, and those OLM.bundle schemas reference a registry v1 bundle today. That's the assumption.
Yeah.
If we want to support native Helm charts directly, there's sort of two different places and avenues that we'd want to go. One is you can make a catalog that has Helm chart references rather than registry v0 references. So there's a bunch of work that would have to happen to make that work. Separately, we could get Helm chart references working via a direct bundle install mechanism on the cluster extension, which would likely be simpler. But I think we should probably think about the entire vision for supporting Helm charts sort of in one design, and then we can break it up into individual bits of work. I guess what I would not want to end up with necessarily is, yeah, we support Helm charts directly installed via cluster extension, but we don't support them in catalogs, and we never will. Like that seems like it'd be an awkward setup.
Okay.
But yes, the intent is you can somehow provide a Helm chart reference directly to operator controller via either a direct reference or via something that shows up from a catalog. And then operator controller would deploy it, manage it. But again, very early, we haven't designed this. There's lots of like this issue says, lots of open questions about whether that's even feasible. If you scroll down a little, Lala, so the items to consider there, one is and we've seen this with an operator SDK with the Helm operator. Some charts use template functions that cause non-deterministic output. So those would cause permanent infinite loops with reconciles because every time you reconcile, something changes in the template. So that wouldn't be good. If we're going to support hooks, we have to figure out how that works because that means there's phases and weighting that happens. And then what happens if a hook fails? We don't really have a concept for hook failure things or phases at all. So we might have to do some designs there first in order to support that. The CRDs directory, there's this whole thing where Helm chart authors are reading the Helm documentation about how to do CRDs. OLM and operator controller have its own opinions about how CRDs work, and those somewhat stand in conflict with each other. And if we implement Helm chart support, how do we handle the fact that Helm charts might show up where Helm chart authors have structured their charts according to what the Helm documentation says and not what the OLM documentation says? So that's a big, hairy problem to solve. This resource policy keep, this stands right in opposition to that orphan deletion policy. So the Helm resource policy keep is an annotation that chart authors can put on their resources that give chart authors control about which things come in, are deleted when the Helm release is deleted. But we're saying in OLM v1 that the persona who controls whether the objects are deleted are not the chart authors or the bundle authors, it's the cluster administrators. So if a chart shows up and has resource policy keep in it, what do we do? So that's another open question. Chart dependencies, in theory, it's fine. Like we can support chart dependencies, except like there's a whole bunch of question about like, well, what if the chart dependency comes from a repo that's not accessible to the cluster? Do we need to support all the different chart dependency URI formats? Like, so Helm supports both HTTPS and OCI. Right now, we only support OCI. So we need to figure out what that looks like. If chart dependencies are supported, then there are use cases for OLM to be supported in disconnected clusters. So how do chart dependencies work in disconnected clusters? We'd have to figure that part out. And then chart distribution is the last thing there, which is sort of what I said, which is we only support OCI-based charts, or we would theoretically only support OCI-based charts because we currently only support OCI-based images. Would we add support for HTTPS? Would that also apply to other bundle formats? So there's questions there. So long story short, this is something we think would be valuable, like supporting a general purpose format that's very popular in the community. But there's a lot of these things that are like, this makes it sort of difficult to figure out how we would actually do it in a way that works for people.
Okay,
So,
thank you for elaborating, Joe. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So, Joe, do you think, I obviously you have more background on this. I definitely feel we should start looking into probably one part of the problem. So because it looks a very big problem, so unless we start like chipping away, like
Well, I think what we should do first is we should say, we just reject, like, let's just go down the list. We're not going to support hooks. We're not going to support Helm charts that have a CRDs directory. We're not going to support Helm charts that result in a manifest that has the resource policy keep. We're not going to support Helm charts that have dependencies. And we're only going to support OCI-based charts. If we start with that, then all of these problems just disappear initially. So that's why I sort of wrote this up, is like, how about we just, and I know I say just, but like, how about we like look at each of these problem areas and then come up with a way to just reject those charts initially so that we give ourselves space to implement something that we're confident in. And then we can always come back later and say, okay, well, we've got the base level of Helm chart support in. We know it's somewhat limited. So now let's bite off another chunk here and look at how to do hooks or look at how to do chart dependencies or whatever.
By somewhat limited, how limited do you think we actually are? Because that sounds like a lot of functionality we're saying no to.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think like if you go and do Helm create a chart, none of these, I don't know that any of these are problematic. So these are all sort of opt-in features, and there are ways to, like the one that I think would be most problematic for us would be the CRDs directory one, because a lot of people that are using OLM v0 and might be looking to transition to a Helm chart with OLM v1 would have CRDs. For that
Yeah,
one,
I mean,
we
any
would have to,
operator should have, I would expect to have CRDs in them.
yeah. So for that one, we would basically have to have some documentation that says, we'll lifecycle CRDs for you. You just need to put them in your templates directory. So I would probably say like we could get by if we rejected all of this stuff, and we could support like some of the more simple registry V. Well, think about this. We have a whole bunch of registry V1 bundles that don't have hooks, that don't have resource policy keep. Most of them don't have dependencies. Most of them are distributed via OCI image registries. So for those, like maybe we could translate those to Helm charts, and pretty much all of those would work with this set of constraints. So maybe that's how we target this. Like maybe we say, all right, the first stage is we want to be able to make it possible to migrate from registry v1 to a Helm chart. And we'll maybe, and part of this epic maybe is writing a tool that helps you do that.
Yeah, I think that should be a separate epic, right? I mean, we create a separate epic saying we're only focusing on this part, and then we also help migrate.
I would say let's wait on writing more epics. Like this epic is about supporting Helm charts. So when we get to the point that we want to do it, then we can schedule a design meeting and start hashing out some of the details and figuring out if we want to change these epics at all.
So for the migration from registry v1 to Helm chart, do you think that should be something we should look in 1.1?
No, I don't think we would do that until we're also going to support Helm charts. And I don't think like this is a big enough thing that I think I would probably put this behind some of the other epics, like the direct bundle install, for example. I think this would come back after that. It's debatable though, right? Like if we don't have direct bundle install, then the only way that this works is if you have a catalog API that lets you put Helm charts in the catalog. That's its own set of work, right? So like there's, no matter how you cut it, there's some pre-work that has to happen to make this really usable. But I don't know that we will really make much progress on like, should we make another epic right now until we have some of those initial discussions about where do we want to start with this. And Adam, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple of points about this. I think operator authors do have, they use the CRD directory, but I don't think cluster admins really use that as like an install. They do like ignore CRDs or whatever that flag is, because Helm doesn't support upgrades of of entities that have CRDs in them. So people are building their old tooling to manage their cluster installs of things, or they're using Argo and applying things via customized before or after the fact, or things like that, right? So I don't think we need to worry about that one per se as much.
I think we need to worry about it because what we're going to try to say is, without exception, we support Helm charts, right? So it's like it would be hard to say we support Helm chart, and I realize that this epic talks about like we're going to have some exceptions, but it would be hard to say we support Helm charts with CRDs, but we expect you to have some other out of band way of managing those. Like that, like immediately sort of throws up some red flags about, well, you don't really support Helm charts then. So that's where I think the complexity comes in, is like, what are we going to say we support when we say we're going to support Helm charts? And I also think the scope of what we want to be able to support is beyond operators. Like we should be able to, if someone has a MongoDB Helm chart, great. You can install that with OLM v1.
Because our second, or the last point in there, only OCI is supported. We're basically disenfranchising every certified Helm chart that OpenShift has.
Not necessarily, because we control the pipeline. So our pipeline could build OCI Helm charts and push them into an image registry.
In theory, yes, but it doesn't today. So I'm just saying that as a caveat, right? Like there's also other people that's how they distribute their custom charts for their organizations, right? So
somehow,
so we have no control over those folks, right? Like that.
Well, from an upstream perspective, we would say either so far we only support OCI because that's easy. Or yeah, we're also going to do the work to go and add support for HTTPS. And I think my feeling is let's just do it as incrementally as we can. So like what's the minimum viable product for supporting Helm charts? If we've got all these different little bits of things that we think are a little bit of complexity, let's just not do those. And then we can meet, 10% of the user base with what they've got, which will work. And then we'll figure out of all those little bits of complexity that we decided not to work on yet, which thing should we do next? And then we'll go and add support for HTTPS references and OCI references, or we'll go and support CRD handling a little better, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just like one other point I wanted to make, I think there's definitely more value in like time and like engineering effort to figure out the direct bundle install than trying to figure out how to put Helm inside of a catalog. Because I think more people would be inclined to use this product if they don't have to use any of the operator framework tooling.
I agree. But the point that I made earlier, though, I would not want to go down the path of we support different bundle formats, but we also only support subsets of the distribution mechanisms for those, right? Like maybe that's an interim state that we're in, but we should have a goal that like no matter which format you want to ship your extension with, you have like all the options are available in terms of how those things are consumed. You can reference it directly, you can reference it via catalog. And the reason I say that is there's a ton of value add in the whole upgrade graph and the way that the catalogs work that you don't get with direct bundle installs. And it would be a shame, I think, if we said, yeah, we support Helm charts, but also like you don't get access to any of the real benefit of what operator controller and catalog D give you, which are the automatic upgrades and all the policy around that. But I'm not saying we have to implement it all at once either.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm just like, if one of the main goals, so to speak, is to evangelize this and get people using it, I think, direct bundle install, direct Helm install is the quickest path forward to show people that there's more value here. And then it's like, oh, by the way, hey, we have this other thing we're working on where you can have an upgrade graph and, we do the work and that Helm can't.
Yep, totally agree.
So, yeah, we need more discussion, but do we want to set up meetings specifically for this? Do you want to talk about it?
I think this is low enough on the priority list that it's not going to end up in our 1.1 list, and we should not do anything yet with it.
Okay, so we'll come back to this later. Cool. Sorry, there is another one. Support, which we talked about, did we touch during the discussion? Support direct bundle installation.
This one I think we should pull into 1.1, honestly. Because I agree with what Adam was saying about lowering the obstacles and the barrier to entry for using OLM. If you don't have to make a catalog and push it to a registry and then make a cluster catalog object and reference it and do that whole thing, that cuts out a lot of work that's hard to understand. So I think from an adoption standpoint, implementing this would be a big win.
One question around Helm and this one is, by implementing this, will it make it hard for us to in future support Helm charts, or is basically it's mutually exclusive?
Yeah, I think it's orthogonal. This is just about where do I get my reference from? Do I get it from a catalog, or do I get it because the user told me?
Okay.
Directly.
Cool.
I think I don't know the right word, but like it doesn't help us like do Helm easier, but it helps us meet Helm authors kind of in the closer to where they publish things and how they're used to publishing things.
Yeah.
I don't know how to word that better, but it's like, it doesn't help us do any of the work, but it gives them a feature that they're used to.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
It helps them, it'll help everyone reduce the amount of work that they have to do. And for Helm chart authors that have never built a catalog, it eliminates some work that we would have to ask them to do otherwise.
Way better way of saying it, yes.
Cool. Move to the next one. Is support watch namespaces via parameterization for registry v1 bundles in extension API.
So we don't have an extension API. We used to, so I don't know if this was written with that in mind.
Long time ago, January 31st.
Yeah. So high level, the idea here is right now we have no parameterization, regardless of what specific thing we want to parameterize in the cluster extension. So the idea here is, so right now in operator controller, we have this list of limitations. One of them is, does it support all namespaces mode? Yes or no? If no, reject. What we could do, and this is debatable whether this makes sense to do from a strategy and vision perspective, but from a technical perspective, what we could do is we could say, oh, well, we know how registry v1 bundles would need to be templated. So we could design a generic feature in operator controller around bundles provide schemas for templatization, for parameterization, users provide the values. And if we had that feature, then we could have a general purpose thing where no matter what the bundle format is, users can provide whatever values they want, and then we would validate against the schema from the bundle, and then we would just pass those values into the templating engine, and whatever happens, happens, and we don't really care. And if you have that feature, then you could, in theory, say, well, I know how to write a schema for a registry v1 bundle. And one of the things that's parameterizable there is the watch namespace. So we can put the watch namespaces in the schema and start letting cluster admins specify it. So that's what this epic is about.
So seems important, but I don't know if this is something we need to do for 1.1, right?
Well, so the reason that you might say we should do this is right now we have the limitation that you have to support all namespaces mode if you're an operator. And if you look at what's in the catalogs that we've seen, there's a pretty decent chunk of operators that don't support all namespaces mode. So the argument, and I'm not sure I even buy this argument myself, but the argument is, well, we should be more compatible with more of what's in the v0 catalogs. And in order to do that, one of the things we can do to be more compatible is to make it possible to install operators that support own or single or multi-namespace install modes.
Yeah, that was my question. So this it looks like this is related to v0 migration to v1.
It's more related to compatibility. And then if you, by extension, then it's related to migration, I guess.
Okay, so maybe we should consider it for 1.1 and then take a look again and figure out.
Adam, you got your hand up again.
I don't disagree with anything you just said, Joe, but just maybe flipping the narrative a little bit, like as opposed to, hey, let's support more things in, registry. Do we have in registry v1? Think about it as meeting cluster admins where they are today, right? Because like a lot of these, enterprises have cluster farms of 1,000 clusters or something, so they don't want to give cluster access to many things because they're shared, right? And they only want to give namespace access to the teams that need that specific operator, right? So maybe just frame the problem a little bit differently, just for that aspect.
One thing I should have made clear: there are no plans yet to do a namespace scoped API. So like, I think this epic was just written when that's what we had. And then I think the community decided in like March or April this year, like, we're not comfortable with the namespace scoped API, so we'll just move everything to the cluster scope. So if we were to do this epic, I think it would be sort of refactored to be on the cluster extension API, not the extension API. If we want to do a cluster, or if we want to do an extension API that's namespace scoped, that would absolutely be a separate epic at this point. The reason that we are hesitating on namespace scoped API and this watch namespace stuff is that OLM v0 tried to implement multi-tenancy and pretty much failed. Because it's not really possible. Like, it's not OLM v0's fault that it wasn't built well. It just like it doesn't match with what the expectations of Kubernetes are. So in OLM v1, we basically said like, we're just not going to implement and support multi-tenancy. We're not going to get in your way of it, but we're not going to build any features that make it possible to do multi-tenant stuff natively. This epic blurs the lines a little bit on that, right? Because if we did this, we'd basically be saying, hey, we'll let you install stuff that was originally intended to be used in a multi-tenant way. And that's where the philosophical strategic vision question of supporting this comes in. It's like, yes, we could do it, but is that really the right direction for where we want this project to go? And the unfortunate thing is, that means that we don't support as much of what we supported in v0. But one of the things we said we tried to support in v0 was multi-tenancy, and we're not trying to do that here. So like, maybe that's where we draw a line. It's a complex topic with lots of emotion, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm not saying that we should support a namespace extension as opposed to a cluster extension. I'm just saying that cluster admins might be more inclined to, the watch namespace thing as a stopgap.
I think the way to approach this is to figure out what problems folks are trying to solve with that. And you gave a good example, right? Like, oh, I don't want someone that has namespace permissions to be able to break my cluster. So like, if we can come up with a list of those kind of problems, maybe the solution isn't multi-tenancy. Maybe the solution is something else. And we can start documenting, here's what the real solution to your problem is. We apologize for leading you in the wrong direction in OLM v0 and thinking that multi-tenancy was a thing that we could solve. We can't, but here's the way that we can solve that problem in another way. Like, maybe that's the approach that we take.
So I have added Triage needs information, also added this comment. So this is something I think we should look into. Should we look into this with 1.1 time frame or later? And to begin with, I mean, whatever we're putting in 1.1 is not a guarantee that it will be in 1.1, right? We'll refine it more, go through the epics, figure out, and it's mostly, if you cannot, it will be pushed to the next one. So it feels like we should look into this, at least define the problem, what we want to do. So I'm tempted to put it in 1.1. What do you guys think?
I'm tempted to put it in 1.1 at least so that we can start talking about the problems and writing down some of these things that I was talking about, right? Like
Right. Yeah, similar.
maybe if we carve out a way to do this, then we could, like I said, I think it's actually really easy technically. So it's not about how hard it's going to be. It's just about whether we want to. So I think we should try to have that conversation and have something written down sooner rather than later. So I'm +1 on putting in 1.1 for now.
Right. So thanks, Joe. Yeah, let anybody who wants to speak up before I go to the next topic. Cool. So we covered like till 9:25, and it's almost the time. So we have another community meeting after this. So I wanted to give you a few minutes, but looks like I could not. But that's fine. So thanks everyone for coming, and I'll see you soon.